Hey, it's Soul with a guide to Shards of Domination, the customizable set bonus that is coming in patch 9.1. How did these work? What are the set bonuses? Which are the good ones? And most, if not all, your questions should be answered here. For more guides and such, please subscribe to the channel, and let's get started with first a TLDR. I'm gonna go pretty in-depth with explaining the ins and outs of this feature, but if I were to summarize this very plainly, it's special gems and gear that will drop that you slot for effects. You upgrade them with stuff that you get from the raid and a weekly quest. You play with the combinations, take it to battle, and go. Shards of Domination are basically gems that have special standalone effects, with a bonus if you combine certain ones together. There are 9 in total and come in 3 different flavors, in this case Blood, Frost, and Unholy, which are colored red, blue, and purple respectively. Each shard's effects can work everywhere, while the set bonus only works in the Maw, Korthia, Torghast, and the Sanctum of Domination raid. I'm going to get to the shard's effects and set bonus a little bit later in this guide. These shards can be slotted only into gear that supports Domination Shards. At the moment, this gear is definitely raid gear, but they do have a number of sources, such as, obviously, the Sanctum of Domination raid, where they're a drop. There's the Great Vault, assuming that you fulfill requirements to get the raid gear from it, the weekly time walking and dungeon events that award raid gear at the end, and Korthia, where 2 vendors sell a piece of Domination gear for a specific slot depending on your armor type. And I'm going to have a chart here up screen to tell you which slots are being sold per armor type. You'll also see a chart for how Domination sockets are distributed per armor type. As a side note, in case you're wondering if the socket upgrades this season will work on Domination gear that already have a slot technically, the answer is yes. As you can see here, you can have both. Anyway, back to the vendors. Using me and my plate-wearing paladin as an example, I have an opportunity to purchase Domination slotted gloves from vendors. The accessibility here is great if I take a more chill and solo path through content. Since I raid though, I'm also going to be working to collect all the Domination slotted gear for the head, chest, shoulder, and wrist slots, along with the glove slots to maximize the flexibility with shards. As a side tip, take note of what gear is going to be taken up by sockets and how this might conflict with your setup of legendary gear. I plan on crafting one of the new Covenant-specific legendaries in the patch, which take up the chest or the waist slot, but since I see a conflict of interest in the chest slot, I'm going to be making this legendary for the waist. I consider this as more long-term planning. After all, the gear itself needs to drop too, right? But if I can act on these future considerations now, great. Just like previous set bonuses, these alter player behavior in such a way that we're going to prioritize wanting to get that set bonus as soon as possible. Well, maybe at least. This process is sort of twofold. Based on our current information, you need both the gear and the shards to slot said gear. What makes this more than a bit cumbersome is that in order to activate the set bonus, you must equip a certain piece of Domination gear. So to activate the Unholy set, you need to equip a Domination helmet from the raid. For Frost, you need Domination shoulders, and for Blood, you must wear a Domination chest. I don't even think this is much of an opinion. I think this adds a pretty unnecessary layer of complication to the gearing game, and frankly I can't think of an elegant solution where this is not frustrating. Now this could be patched out before release or hotfixed, but there might be something in place that we're just not seeing too. I've yet to find a tutorial kind of quest with a freebie. I explained the sources for gear, but the sources for the shards are a bit unclear, so I'm just gonna speculate. One thing is certain at least, a single blood shard is on the loot table of the upcoming world boss, Morgeth, Tormentor of the Damned, who is located in Korthia. This guy probably won't show up until the start of Season 2 like other raid bosses, but I haven't found where shards drop anywhere else. I'm going to guess that, sort of like conduits, these have a chance to drop off of any boss, maybe even trash mobs in the raid. From my testing, these 9 shards are unique. Once you get a shard once, the same shard will never drop again, kind of like conduits, and I'll explain this a little bit more later. So let's talk about the actual shards and what they do, starting with the blood shards. We start with the Shard of Beck, which increases your damage as a percentage when you have 50% or more health than your target. This is shown when you have an Exsanguinate debuff on the target. Based on target dummy testing, this translates to your health percentage relative to the target. So if you're at 100% health, this gem will not kick in until your target is at 50% or lower health. Of course, if you take damage in the meantime, this bonus will just fall off, so consider this as like the softest of execute bonuses. The Shard of Rev increases Leech. Simple. The Shard of Jazz increases your healing received and maximum HP by a pretty pathetic amount, but together this completes the set bonus Bloodlink. It's a debuff applied when dealing direct damage to your current target, and it's permanent, at least until you deal damage to a different target. This ticks off every 3 seconds, dealing damage and healing you for 100% of the damage done. If your health is full, that health is instead transferred to another target, preferably one that needs healing. Personally, while I don't find the individual shards to be all that impressive, I dig the set bonus. As a tank, it's a reasonable heal for me or a friendly. In more extreme situations, a full raid with this set bonus could have a pretty good amount of passive damage and healing added to maybe where a healer can be subbed out for a DPS, but this also means that the raid won't be taking advantage of otherwise maybe better shard or set bonuses for throughput purposes. Still though, I think it's pretty nice. Let's move on to the Frost Shards. The Shard of Kier creates a damage reduction bubble that pulses every 5 seconds and caps out after 25 seconds if no damage is taken. I think this is great for tanking and passive heals, and straight up competes with the blood set bonus in terms of passive healing thanks to the bubble effect, so maybe there should be some rebalancing done. I think for most tanks this will be slotted regardless of the content being run, and in encounters that require constant raid healing, progression teams might consider having the raid switch to this for some padded healing, maybe even combine this with the blood set for even more. The Shard of Tell causes your critical hits to cause a friendly to take less damage from enemies. Try as I might though, I wasn't able to test this out properly, but on paper it doesn't seem like a bad passive heal at all in case of constant pulsing damage. Finally, we have the Shard of Core, which gives you a damage buff for 20 seconds after you strike a new target. This is a fantastic gem that DPSers will want to hold on to, just like tanks may want to hold on to the Shard of Kier. A few percentage points isn't a lot, but for top players, when they want to squeeze out every bit of damage that they can, this provides a very strong bonus in ad-based encounters or in Mythic Keystone dungeons. Together, this set activates the Winds of Winter buff. It's kind of a mouthful, so listen up. Over a period of 20 seconds, the damage from your critical strikes is stored, and after the 20 seconds, you explode for that damage stored, and that damage becomes an absorption shield. I don't tend to talk about specific numbers in guides like this, especially before a patch goes live, but at the moment the numbers here they really hamstring what could be a really cool set bonus. And it's because the damage stored is capped at 180 damage per crit strike, so your actual damage doesn't matter as much as your crit strike does because it only stores a really pathetic amount of damage. Also, because the 20 seconds moves in a cycle, you have no way of really controlling this explosive damage, so as a ranged DPS, this set bonus has almost no value. In a movement-heavy fight, it's very questionable, and because of the very low amount of damage stored in each crit strike, it just doesn't do a lot anyway. In its current form, this set is pretty useless, but I'm counting on this being addressed by the time people are even able to get enough shards to make this set. Finally, we move on to the Unholy set, starting with the Shard of Zed. This makes healing spells have a chance to give their targets a buff that drains life from enemies around them. Like the Shard of Kier and Core, this is a shard that is a must-keep for healers. Nothing wrong with some free healing, right? But I tried to test this out on my tank and it appears that it doesn't work on yourself, and I wasn't able to get it to proc on others in my testing, at least so far, so for all I know there might be some sort of party or raid restriction. The Shard of Oth increases your speed. Whoop-de-doo. Finally, the Shard of D's Nut applies a stacking debuff on enemies that causes them to take extra damage. It's very minor compared to the Shard of Core, but it has no restrictions, and while pure AoE damage does not apply this debuff to enemies, cleaves will. The set bonus from this is called Chaos Bane. It builds up your primary stat pretty quickly, and when reaching 15 stacks, the buff explodes as damage, and applies a new buff that gives you 30 stacks worth of the buff, which lasts for 15 seconds. Now, I'm not a simming person, but I would argue that this will be the go-to bonus for most players regardless of role or being a melee or a ranged class, or at least, that's according to the current numbers. It's easy to understand, it seems to proc pretty often, and there's a bit more control with lining this up with cooldowns during combat. Shards of Domination can be upgraded to increase their effectiveness by a modest but not really game-breaking amount. Upgrading them involves the use of Stygian Embers, a currency found in 2 places that I know of. One is the raid. I'm speculating here, but I bet the amount of embers that you get is fixed. This is to prevent behavior like farming up multiple difficulties. So for example, we won't be able to farm the first boss on Rage Finder, and then normal, and then heroic, and then mythic, and then get 4 times the stuff. It's likely to be a 1 loot opportunity per boss per difficulty. This is nothing unfamiliar, but this also creates a scenario where players might feel like they're falling behind because they didn't make enough embers income that week. But between the current numbers that come from individual shards and the cost of upgrades, I don't see being behind having much impact at all. The other source of embers is from the weekly quest in Korthia, Shaping Fate, which is going to be a mainstay for most players. This quest gives a little bit of everything, like anima and resources. In fact, it's replaced the old Saving Souls from the Maw quest when it comes to staying caught up with Renown. So it's cool that embers will come from this quest as well, making the shards sort of accessible for everybody. Each shard has 5 upgrade levels with increasing upgrade requirements. How long it'll take to upgrade all 9 of them, or if it'll even be possible before the next season, is not known. To perform the upgrade though, all you gotta do is talk to this vendor here and you can buy the upgraded shard with your current shard in hand and enough embers. To help with this, the vendor also sells a soul-fired chisel to remove a shard, and then you can buy the upgraded shard. The chisel itself costs 2500 Stygium. In case you were wondering, this should resolve any questions about needing to level up multiples of the same gem, needing multiple gear sets, and so on. It's only a bit cumbersome, but if you need to redo your shards for a particular boss or running keystones, just pop the shards off and replace them as needed. Anyway, as you upgrade your shards, the vendor will automatically update and show you higher upgrades until you start finishing up, and then these upgrades will start disappearing altogether. This tells me once again that we should not expect a situation where we have multiples of the same shards that we would mix and match with different sets. So real quick, in case you're wondering, what am I going to use? I tend to gear for fun and see if it still gets the job done, so I'm probably going to go for the blood set for that healing, with cure for the bubble and tell for the bubble on other people. Obviously it's not optimal for throughput, but I just like the feeling of being a tank who does more protecting than attacking. There are a few concerns that I have about these shards and set bonuses, one of which being that the Unholy set bonus has a pretty clear advantage over the other 2, and the Frost bonus, while it seems cool, it's just too broken to give any serious consideration. Also, the fact that a few shards provide percentage bonuses to damage make them the clear go-to for most players who are throughput-minded, and outside of raids, they'll be going hard on slotting those. Meanwhile, the shards that just provide leech and speed are pretty forgettable. And of course, getting access to the shards and socketed gear themselves isn't going to be a problem for raiders, but it's going to be a huge issue for the top end of the Keystone community, who are going to feel compelled to run Mythic Sanctum for those high item level pieces that just don't come from the Great Vault. But does this mean that shards are super overpowered and that they totally invalidate Keystones? At the very top end, these shards and the fact that they do apply in the raid do make the difference between victory and defeat, but again, that's at the very top. The set bonuses themselves seem pretty cool, but I've noticed that they don't get any stronger as I upgrade shards. I'm also still perplexed by this whole thing with the set bonus requiring a specific piece of gear to be worn. Really, it feels like it almost compromises the set bonus altogether, making this whole thing feel like a super special piece of gear with really lofty requirements. It is possible this will be a non-issue. Raiders, after all, will raid, raiders will get raid gear, but I can imagine more than a handful of scenarios where certain people have all the shards and everything that they want, but they just can't activate the set bonus they want to because the piece that they need has not been dropping. Now, there could be more that we haven't discovered yet. There is still time before the patch, before the season starts and everything. But I wonder if there's going to be a separate way to power up the set bonus only through a quest, perhaps. Maybe the set bonus is a sort of knob for Blizzard to turn as a gradual nerf to raid content, as opposed to the numerous targeted nerfs of Castle Nathria during Season 1. I bring this up because right now I just don't find the set bonuses themselves to be like, whoa, this stuff is like really crazy. But if the numbers did happen to be 2 and higher, my tone would totally change, and that might be the intention later on. That about wraps up everything that we currently know about Shards of Domination. Of course, if I did miss anything, please leave it in a comment because we're all here to help each other out. I do hope this guide was useful and it'll help ease your gearing decisions. Feel free to leave a like if it was helpful and to subscribe for more guides and all things Warcraft. I'll see you next time. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.